This is Breaking Bread with the Chief, presented by the Best in Blue podcast and the Memphis Police Department. When we break bread, it's an act of closeness and openness. We gather around the table to shed our armor and lighten our load, even if it's just for a little while. Chief CJ Davis hosts a series of kitchen table style conversations at locally owned restaurants with an assortment of our city's influencers and leaders, who provide valuable insight into what's really going on and what folks are thinking. We're breaking bread to break down barriers. On this episode, Chief CJ is at a Memphis favorite, Owen Brennan's restaurant, with guests Howard Robertson, co-founder of Trust Marketing; Dana Wilson, Executive Director of Bridges USA; Keedran Franklin, activist and entrepreneur. Come join us at the table.
Well, so good afternoon, everyone. And I want to first of all tell each of you, Dana, Keedran, and Howard, thank you for having lunch with me today. This is the first of several conversations that I plan to have, and hopefully you all will join again. But I believe that the best way for us to find solutions in our community is not to work in silos, and for the police department to constantly come up with crime strategies and all kinds of other plans on our own, but to get input from those individuals that we know are working in the community in a myriad of ways. So the best way for us to have great conversation is over food. And this is something that has been sort of an albatross around my neck since I've been in Memphis, the great cuisine here. So again, thank you, and I hope you enjoy your lunch, but I also hope that we have a real healthy conversation too. And so we're at the great Owen Brennans, and at this time, our chef is going to come in and talk to us a little bit about the menu. Mm-hmm.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
I'm here to talk to y'all about some of the things we offer here at Owen Brennan's. We've got everything from fresh Gulf oysters, shuck them every morning, to our crab cakes and barbecue shrimp.
Yummy.
All different kind of po' boys. We have, of course, the favorites like the fried catfish, the black and red fish, and my personal favorite, the pasta jambalaya. It is my
I think that's
thing
what I'm
on the menu.
having today.
I was wondering who got that. That's a good choice.
Yeah. I heard about the brunch.
The brunch is good. You should definitely come by and try it. We have from peel and eat shrimp, oysters, prime rib.
Oh, wow.
We have our famous omelet chef Shorty. He'll put you in the spotlight. A lot of people come.
Is that only on Sunday?
It's only on Sundays from 9 to 2:30.
Okay, but thank
good
you.
day. Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Of
We
course.
look forward to lunch.
I hope y'all enjoy everything.
So right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Join us for the Memphis Police Department Hiring Expo, Saturday, August 26, 2023, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 170 North Main Street downtown. We'll be taking applications and interviewing candidates on site. Salary starting at $54,611, increasing to $60,713 after probation. Benefits include a $15,000 sign-on bonus, up to $10,000 in relocation assistance. For more information or details, visit joinmpd.com.
Check out all your Kitsukian favorites now.
Memphis and various issues here in our city. But I think what I like for us to really have a good discussion about is our young people, our youth. We hear a lot about crime right now. And there's a lot to unpack because, you know, what we see on TV in the evenings is, you know, the bad story, what has happened. But there's a lot to unpack that really led up to whatever that situation is. And I'd be interested because all of you have different perspectives and different vantage points because of the kind of work that you do in the communities. You have different, you know, vantage points. You can educate me and I can kind of educate you on the issues and challenges that we have also in the police department and really how do we reach solutions. So I'd be interested to really hear about what you all think some of the root problems are in our community.
In terms of root problems, I believe we have and first of all, my perspective is from that of what I call a participant observer. I'm a marketer. And so I was taught that the best marketers are great participant observers. Participant meaning that ideally you're part of the audience that you are looking at, and observer from the standpoint of being a marketer and understanding how to take those experiences and those observations and put them into a marketing context. I think we've got a problem, a communication problem first, because as we discussed, we've got the biggest issue with young Black men in Memphis. And I'll tell you a little, well, briefly. On the morning young Dolph was killed, he was killed at like lunchtime. Yep. That morning we were at 201 Poplar doing a focus group with 8 young 18 to 24 year old men that were locked up for very violent crimes, from carjacking to murder one. And what they said to us was amazing. I've never forgotten it. One said that there are no OGs on the block anymore. And he went on to say, everybody out there is as stupid as us. There's no voice of reason. And when somebody comes up with something, you know, let's go jack somebody, or let's go do this, or something that we shouldn't do, there's no voice of reason. The same said it used to be when there were OGs on the block. Somebody to sort of intercept and absolutely. Boy, you don't need to be doing that. Right. Yeah. And they would listen. Right. But they were saying there's everybody out there is about their age, and people claiming to be allegedly OGs are like 35, 36. Which is relatively young in my book. Absolutely, it's young in their book, and they really don't respect them. So I think one of the things is that, as we were talking about, everybody's talking about them, talking at them, to your point, talking over their heads, and nobody's talking to them. And that's what we do in the marketing business. In the marketing business, when we want to find out something about a target audience, the first thing we do is talk to them. Focus groups or whatever, you talk to them, you ask them, what's the issue? Right. I mean, what's causing you to do this and whatnot? And so I think that's one main thing that we need to absolutely do regularly, not just the one and done, but regularly talk to them, see what their issues are, see what, if you will, triggers are, see what their influences are, and deal with that. So to that point, you know, who's the best candidate to reach that? And I'm going to ask you, Keedran, and the reason I'm asking is because, you know, as a police department, we could be well intended. We can try to reach some of the most vulnerable communities, but will we be received? And will our approach even be effective? So, you know, I'm interested to hear, if not us, who?
You need what you call credible messengers.
Yes.
Right? And those credible messengers look like me. Yeah. Come from some of the same walks as the children.
Credible messengers. I like that.
Are perpetuating things that are being seen, shown, developed, created. And so again, I come from the underworld, right? Joined street orgs early, right? And but I also I'm a nerd, so I love learning. Right? Even with the street org, I learned that there was positive things to it, right?
Right.
A lot of street orgs, difference between a gang and a street org, like a lot of street orgs have like board of directors, right?
Right.
So they move like a government. All I have to do is teach, and that gives me just a scope of what Civics 101 look like, right? When I know that
Did you learn that in Choppertown? We grew up in the same neighborhood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, different time. I mean,
Different time.
I know we look like we're about the same
About the same age.
Yeah. So and I myself have become a credible messenger, right? Just based off of people saying, coming from someone like Chauffeurtown, right, where the love is thicker than the finances, right? Like a lot of our families had to put things together. Like my family built the church that's over there, Galilee, right? And I ran from the church, and I didn't run from the church because of I wanted to go do other things. I had run because I was trying to search, right? I was trying to learn other things. So I went and studied like the Torah and the Quran, right? And the tablet. So I wanted to learn more. And I just was not getting what I judged, the questions I was asking from the church, right? And so a credible messenger being someone who they can see have gone through their struggle, they can see it on them, right? And then see some of like my trajectory out of it. So my life started being a little public around like organizing, political organizing, union organizing. I had become a threat to the government based off of my activity around First Amendment rights, right? And how I exercised that, right? And so what I noticed was some of those same youth started seeing like, okay, this is somebody who come from the streets and then he's doing political work, right? They didn't recognize that this is me evolving, right? Seeing our issues, seeing how me come from selling weed to selling coffee, right? Legitimate businessman, right? I just reset the paradigm of how I looked at business, how I looked at things, right?
Was that viewed with suspicion? Did suddenly people not trust you because of what you were doing?
No. It was viewed as with certain guys, it was viewed as noble, right? Like he figured a way in the public, got beat up a lot, right? In the public to change the trajectory of his life, of my life, right? Some of the issue comes in is when we dress up in this way, I don't show the youth how I take these steps. They showing the youth how to steal in cars. The other side, we showing you how to sell drugs. We showing every piece of it.
That's right.
But the positive, because it look a little ugly. Wow. I might struggle a little bit. I might miss my bill a little bit. But eventually, hey, I do great for myself because I organized myself out of poverty, right? Just reshaped what it looks like.
So for you to tell your story and to be able to share it back and really, invest time to other individuals to show, if you did it, I could do it too.
Most definitely.
So I'm curious, and Dana, you've been in and worked with youth for a long time, with Bridges. And I know you have a perspective also about, the issues that we talk about of what our youth need and really how law enforcement, comes into play. And sometimes, even though we have programs that have been positive, have been proactive, it's not what our main responsibility is. How do we reach the masses of young people that right now seem to just really be unmanaged, so to speak? And I'm not going to even say unmanaged, maybe uncared for. Yeah.
I think I recently heard someone talk about underserved young people and thinking about if we could reframe that to disserviced young people, because it would shift the burden to thinking about what these are our community, right? So we can't think about someone else's child or this is our community. And too often we're doing we are disservicing young people. And I think one thing I would say is, and this might sound naive, but it's not. And we interact with thousands of young people every year, and there are like 150,000 middle and high school age youth in the greater Memphis metropolitan area.
Right.
We have a huge youth population.
Yes, we do.
And so that the vast majority of young people are just trying to get somewhere. They're just trying to do what they need to do, be something. And so the vast majority of young people are trying.
Yeah.
The margin of error for young people who are particularly Black boys is so narrow, and the trauma often that they've experienced in their life is so great that it's almost impossible. And that's one of the things we hear. And I think I worry two things. I worry about us getting caught thinking about we're really talking about a symptom of a lot of things that we need to go way upstream and deal with very seriously. And I don't think that should be the police role, right? Like that's not, but we have to invest in the same way we invest in the police. Because if we're talking about public safety, but we're like, if we're only thinking about it from the perspective of having a hammer, right? Like maybe policing and incarceration is a hammer. You're trying to build a whole house, public safety, well-being, a whole house with a hammer. Right. You can't hammer a house together. You gotta have a lot of pieces together. Maybe you can hammer a house together. It's gonna be a really shoddy house,
But you
right?
gotta have a saw, you gotta cut some things.
Yeah, you got a lot of different roles. You got to have all those things, and so we need more resources to deeply
deal
invest
with
in those
those other
things.
issues. You're absolutely right.
It's key.
I like that analogy.
And I do think also I worry about us criminalizing young people for being young people. And I think most recently the discussion around curfew laws and the downtown abatement plan and things. You got a lot of young people who live in proximity to downtown. It is the safest place to be entertained and hang out with your friends. It's the closest movie theater. It's like it is a place, and young people got to be young people. Like we don't want to rob them of the opportunity to be young people. And if you have 2,000 young people on a Saturday night downtown, and maybe 20 of them are creating a problem by breaking into cars, but we're going to criminalize all 2,000 of them? Right. That does a deeper damage to our community fundamentally. Yeah. It does not solve the problem. Right. And it harms young people. And I think we have to really be careful because we are talking about a community where we have way too many young people living in poverty, whose families and maybe them are experiencing serious mental health challenges, serious issues with substance abuse and just the ravages of poverty and a lack of services. Right. So we gotta, we need to handle young people with care.
We absolutely do. And this is a good opportunity for me to personally say that, the whole idea of crime, number one, abatement is not a word that you should use with children. No. So even though, we have creative, supervisors and managers, and everybody's tasked with coming up with what your plan is going to be. And this was a particular presentation that was basically leaked, was never approved, because when I first saw it, I said, "Why are we using that word? You can abate weeds, you can abate bugs." I said, "But you can't abate children." No. So the terminology itself was not the correct approach. I'm a lover of children, and when I go out in the community, I'm constantly talking about the impact that the violence is having on our children, especially African American men, because I don't really look at it as, we had 100 homicides in the first quarter of the year. I look at all of those African American young men that are missing now from their families. Absolutely. And I think about all of the people that are impacted by that loss. Absolutely. And then I think about all of the other African American young men who will be incarcerated because of the acts of the 100 homicides. And when you start aggregating the totals of what is happening to our communities, it is a major concern. You have 2 dead, 3 going to jail. 1 dead, 2 going to jail. And that's not just here in our city, it's all over the country. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about African American young men, you're an African American young man. You have probably thought about what that does to our community. You've touched it, you've seen it, you've felt it. And even as a business person, you close to it because you're an African American man.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know how young you are, Howard, but
Thank
you still young. You look young.
Appreciate it. Bless your heart.
So I wanted to clarify that too, because here's what the whole Greenlaw thing was. I looked for probably the first 6 months that I was here to find some place to house my police athletic league. So I wanted to partner initially with like Parks and Recreation. Can we get in? We got officers that are doing all of these baseball programs, all of these football programs. We got one officer, he got 150 kids, and he's moving these kids from one place. Kids love these programs because it gives them an opportunity to have some kind of structured sports. So then I stumbled on Greenlaw, sitting there, not used, and a gym. And I'm thinking this is a perfect spot for me to do community engagement and partner with Parks and Recreation. How it became a detention center, I'm still scratching my head about that. One thing I do know in our city is that the TMZ narratives of things have a way of catching fire and just growing. It's almost like we rather hear the negative story than the real story. Yes. And the real story is that CJ Davis is a mother. CJ Davis has had police athletic leagues in different cities that have been very positive and successful. And the kids that we encounter on a regular basis, they're asking us, they're saying, there's nothing to do after 5 o'clock.
That's what I'm hearing too.
There's nothing for them to do. They said they used to have midnight basketball and all of these different things.
Swim.
This was an opportunity for us to get a gym and hopefully get somebody to sponsor redoing the floor for us and have safe places for our young people to, have opportunities. It's not to pick up kids around. We don't have the capacity to pick up kids around the city.
Yeah.
We have a curfew law. But you don't see police officers picking up children around the city, because I tell them all the time, the backseat of a patrol car is not the place for a child.
Exactly.
That's just
it's
happens
like, how are you
to be
gonna
out.
transport that child without putting them in cuffs, which is
That's
a
right.
traumatic experience anyway.
That's what I was
so
gonna
like
say.
we can't do
It'll
that.
be something that they will never forget.
Yeah, exactly.
That is not our objective. Our objective is to do what we can to help reduce violent crime, in the city, especially violent crime that impacts our young people, and try to respond to some of the young folks that we have seen that are running around with ankle monitors on now because something happened to them, and asking them, what is it that you needed that we need something to do. Right.
They don't know.
Right.
Framing what is it you need is almost a charge. I'd ask what happened, right? Because again, like Dana said, we are a trauma-filled city.
Yeah.
A lot of trauma. And so how that shows up in some of our youth, I can really empathize with, right? And how does that look like? How does this support look like on the front end and the back end, right? And so I heard the pieces around like the youth sports and getting them involved. I wonder what that look like what does a partnership look like outside of like MPD and then the community, right? Because I know there's some, just what could that look like, right? Because there's a budget of what you guys get like 450 million of like and so what does it?
Most of it is, actually it's 279 million, but most of it is, a lot of people don't realize it pays for the officers. A lot of the other budget that we have for community engagement, a lot of that is in-kind donations. People supporting our programs. We have very little money that comes from the city that goes towards those programs. But as human beings that are in this, it would be so irresponsible for me to see a problem and not try to at least do my part to help. Not from an enforcement standpoint, but from a humanistic, take the uniform off and help these young people who need some parental, some hugs, some support, some love. That's
what I found.
And I wanna mention that, but I have an answer for what you just said. There's an organization that is willing, that's a client of ours, that is ready, willing, and able to be a part of the solution. They're called the YMCA. They have facilities all over, and we have had a meeting with them, so they are ready to offer their facilities and presence and expertise, because that's what they do. That's what they do. They aggregate and entertain and provide education for young people. But back to that, I want to compliment you on something and ask you a question. I want to compliment you on the courage and the empathy and the sympathy that you showed as a mother with Tyree Nichols' mother. I think we as a city should thank God that you were in the position that you were in and able to do that, because I believe you connected and related to her mother to mother in a way nobody else could have. And that brings on my question. Mothers have to own what their children do. And in a way, that day you had to, if you, in a manner of speaking, I know they're your employees, they were your officers and all of that, but you had to own that. You had to own that. And that had to be tremendously hard. My question to you is, what would you say to a mother who has a child, a young teenager or whatever, that they know they're doing some bad things, some wrong things and all of that, but they don't know what they should do or could do? What would you say to them? I mean, because whether or not the father likely is not in the picture, but the mother, they all got mamas.
Yeah, they do. And
well, most of them have. I know some of them. I know some folk are out here, some young people out here without that, but the majority of them do. So what do you say to the moms?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of our young men are being raised by their mothers, and and the reason it's not just a guess or hypothesis. It's that we see mothers on a regular basis that say, "I'm trying my best." And I can't, control him, or he's doing this, and I'm doing my best. And they probably are. And a few weeks ago when we had what we call the call-in, and we bring all of these young people that are justice involved, and we offer them all of these support kind of referrals, help them expunge their records and things. When they come to that room, we had 35 in this last session, and the other side of the room were nothing but women, mothers. There's probably 4 men in the room, out of the 35. But that tells you that there are a lot of mothers out there that are trying to wrestle and get their arms wrapped around situations like that. But as a mother, sometimes we have to do what's necessary to save our children. And sometimes that's hard to do. And if you don't do it early, you'll find yourself in a very, very difficult, situation. And it's easier said than done, though, because sometimes mothers want their kids to be able to help them.
And that's a lot of what's happening, right? So I host healing circles, men's circles, right, and women's circles. Sometimes we integrate them every second and fourth Monday. And the last few months, people will refer women to me because they need help with their sons, right? And I'm like, hey, we'll bring them to the men's circles, right? And I've heard of, there's been 3 young people just before they can make it to the men's circle, they're gone, like 14, 13, 16. Yeah. And they're not, and their moms are reaching out, right? It's just that, again, sometimes the child seeing the mama struggling, living in a hotel, and they want to take on that, right? I gotta be daddy.
That's what they think the man's supposed to do.
Oh, that's the setup. That's how a lot of our youth are set up, right? the poverty driving them to be set up to want to be the adult. I got to be the man now, right?
Exactly.
And so
That's all they want to be.
Yeah, that's all.
and not that they want to be, it's what they think they have to be because mama's struggling.
Right.
Yeah.
Because my mama just can't do what she need. I had a guy come the other day to my truck. He was like, "Big bro, and this is real stuff." He was like, "Man, you know somebody want to buy some weed?" I said, "Weed? Bro, what you doing? First of all, this is brown. You gonna get in trouble selling this. Ain't nobody gonna buy it.
Right.
But what do you need money for, man? I'm trying to help mama pay light, but we got to put something on the lights."
And that happens more times, all the time.
Right.
But let's break on that, and I want to come back to that because that's the family dynamic
That's the
that we
institution,
really
yeah.
need to unpack, you know, and really talk more about, you know, as we said, what are the other solutions outside of even law enforcement? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wonder if, I also want to appreciate that you're having these conversations and that you're coming into this conversation to help hopefully reframe public safety.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's the challenge. I think that, and there's so many opportunities to basically, for lack of a better word, like get police officers out of the business of doing certain things.
Most definitely.
And I think that where I hear from students and what we've seen in the research, our students do their own participatory action research. They ask each other and young people and then do research on other opportunities.
Yeah.
It's just like more credible messengers
Yes.
to do that early intervention.
Yes.
Like the police officer is not the right person
Right.
to try to
Right.
do that
Right.
intervention. We need better economic systems to support families.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and we need better mental health services because the police, just like a teacher can't do all the things that a teacher is asked often to do.
Right.
Nor can a police officer
Yeah.
be that in the community.
That's true. And the demand continues to, the community is continuing to ask more and more and more from police.
Yes.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about how do we shift that?
Yeah.
How do we shift that and funnel some of those other responsibilities in other places? Yep, good stuff.
Well, I'm Jim Baker. I'm the owner of Owen Brennans with my family, Austin, Becky, and Lawson. Becky, my daughter, is actually a manager here. And she's been here for 5 or 6 years. We opened February 1990. So we've been here for 33 years. This was raw space when we moved in. And the original core of the building, you see up front, we spent $2 million building that in 1990. Well, when we built the addition in 1995, I was kind of the architect of that. And so when I did this originally, I wanted to write my name in the concrete, but we carpeted it. And so I decided I needed a mural, and I went to a husband-wife team, Christensen, which I think they're still here in Memphis. And they spent about a week. I went to the library and we got 5 or 6 books with pictures of New Orleans courtyards, New Orleans restaurants, and we took a hodgepodge of that and we came up with that name, with the theme, which I think a New Orleans courtyard theme. You see the courtyard, you see the stonework, you see the brickwork, you see the ivy, and you see the metal railings and things. Well, I wanted to put some images on there, and so if you look closely, you can look at the person in the tuxedo, and it has a cane on it, and my initials are on that cane. And that's the side profile of me. That's my wife beside me. And if you look right to the left of that, there are 2 icons on the brick columns right there. One is my oldest son, Austin, on the right. On the other side is my youngest son, Lawson. And on the other side of the mural is my daughter on the statue, Becky Baker, and it's BB. And the glasses on the table, the initials on the glasses are all my grandchildren. And so I kind of immortalized everybody. And what's nice is when you're walking in from the outside, all you see is that mural. And so you think you're walking into a New Orleans courtyard. So we want you to feel like you've been transported to New Orleans with the food, the ambiance, and what you see here.
Be the change you want to see. Join the Memphis Police Department. Salary starting at $54,611, increasing to $60,713 after probation. Benefits include a $15,000 sign-on bonus, up to $10,000 in relocation assistance. Other incentives include pension, health, vision, dental, and life insurance, 25-year retirement, take-home cars, over 75 specialized units. For more information or details, visit joinmpd.com.
So, are you all enjoying your lunch?
So good.
Good.
Absolutely.
So before we went to a little bit of a break, we were talking about mental illness and the various types of situations that police respond to. And I just threw out the numbers just from last year. It just really shows that the mental health crisis, not just here in the city of Memphis, but around the country, it has really increased for a number of reasons. And really, we can't, unpack all of the reasons. All we know is that we responded last year to over 7,000 mental crisis calls. And that, a little over 2,000 of those calls were people that were actually in the middle of committing suicide. So we know that that people are experiencing all kinds of trauma in our community, but we were talking about, the investment in mental health resources. Back in the day, they were there, and the police didn't have to respond and be, the front line trying to figure out whether somebody is autistic or whether or not they have some other kind of mental crisis or, or whether they're on drugs. And the support was there. So what are some solutions to that? And I think we sort of, invest.
Well, what happened to the resources that we used to have?
Disinvestment.
And just pulled away. So for one things I love to see again in creating these, like what we consider the hotlines, right? Where people who are trained in dealing with that show up, right? Versus police. Because we know, again, I've seen where, and I've dealt with some, like in my own neighborhood, there's a young so-called white woman was having an episode. They called police and she freaked out. She'd rather go with anyone else but the police. So how they exacerbate how, those scenarios. And the officer don't just have to show up and be aggressive. They can just show up and people are, oh no, what are the officers here for? And so it triggers something, right? And so
makes the whole situation.
most definitely, it escalates it. Even if the officers don't show up to escalate, then when you have those officers who do show up and don't know how to well deal with people who's going through mental crisis, right? They get physical and then things can get, so I love to see where people show up, right? A hotline to where, hey, Howard can call and say, hey, Keedran, I'm seeing, or whoever's on the hotline, I'm seeing a sister or a brother, he's having an episode. Can you just put some people around and make sure they're safe until the ambulance or, the state, right, can come in and can see them and get them to a hospital or MMHI, right?
You need a
Lakeside.
social worker who's going to coordinate services afterwards. And even if you have a police officer who's trained to intervene in a way that's maybe more soft, they're not the social worker who's going to help them get to all they need, right?
That's right.
So it's not even an appropriate response. And I think what some communities are doing are creating whole new entities that maybe are associated with the health department. And when someone calls EMS, there's options of how you deploy, right? And Memphis already went through a data-driven EMS revision a few years ago where they were trying to make sure that more ambulances could get to people having heart attacks because that's what you need instead of ambulances responding to someone who broke their leg or swallowed some poison. So they retrained and kind of retooled everything to make it more efficient because we needed to save people's lives. And it's sort of the same concept, right? Just applied towards policing. And I think that there are models where, Minneapolis has done it. I think there are other cities, Camden, New Jersey has done this whole rethinking policing strategy. And I think that, we don't have to imitate someone else, but we can definitely listen to what young people are saying and start to build
Figure out
systems
what
that
works
look
for Memphis.
yeah, what's appropriate for Memphis.
Because we're unique. When it comes down to the market of people, how many so-called blacks are in Memphis, we're very unique, right? And in the sense of what happens in Memphis, pretty much what happened around the country, right? And so how do I like to take ownership, how do I do things in the best of the community, right? Or create these structures or think about these. And like I said, rapid response dealing with the community, and that could be something where it's an app, right? We have this one app we use called CL 411 that was kind of created around like anti-bullying, but there's other options you can use. Hey, someone's having an episode and it drops their address and it, and so how do we respond? Because communities are going to respond with kindness, right? And really want to help. And what also comes up is just thinking about like officers who take on seeing so much of these responses and how they start to get in their heads about it, right?
Yeah.
And
So we start spending more money on officer wellness too.
Yeah.
More
have
in
to.
the last few years than I've ever seen in the history. As a police officer, back in the day, I'm gonna say back in the day, we didn't have to worry about officer wellness kinds of situations because for the most part, officers responded to certain types of scenes. They weren't going from one scene to the next. They had time to decompress. Now, this work is back to back.
it's like a warehouse.
And you see one crisis after the next. I mean, you could be on an accident scene 1 minute where you have fatalities, a homicide scene the next, a kidnapping, you name it. So, just the human response to all of that trauma is how well is our workforce, as well, because we know.
When you say well, I want you to get it a little more emphasis. When you say well, in what manner?
Well, when I say well, I'm talking about, how in tune are we to our own emotional intelligence?
Yes.
How in tune are we to this situation? Does it require me to be here or does it require me to be there? And if we don't train and condition our officers to be in tune to their own emotional, pulse, then they can go off the rails because no one is helping them to even identify or even having a supervisor say, don't send that person on that call because they know they just came off of a homicide scene. Send somebody else on that call.
It's almost abuse. It's almost officer abuse when they're sent into so many of those calls, and then how that shows up and how then officers patrol, right? Because if I just come off for homicide and then a DV, right? The next person I see, and you just look like the one that beat that girl two scenes ago, I'm gonna go hard on you, right?
Human instinct.
It's humanness. It's humanness.
And talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's some pretty difficult, heavy stuff to navigate, okay? So, in the corporate realm, let's say you came into MPD as the CEO instead of the police, the chief. You're the CEO. You came into an organization that had a culture, a very long established culture, okay? How do you navigate the culture that you inherited, exacerbated by these emotional things? Like you use the word warehouse. And I can just see, can you imagine showing up for work in a warehouse full of the stuff that your officers deal with and see on a daily basis? Think about it as if it were a warehouse. Warehouse that you can look over from top to bottom is stuff.
Just stuff.
Stuff.
Yeah.
How do you
Trauma, man.
deal with that? You got the culture, and which a lot of which is indeed toxic, and then you got the whole emotional baggage and weight that they have to deal with.
It's almost like recalibrating a car. You know, it's almost like you have to really start working on changing the culture, but the culture has to be changed from the top down. You know, if your leaders set the tone for culture and are resistant to doing something new, then there's little hope that the people that at the very grassroots level are going to be buying into the thing. So it's important that leaders are acculturated. And I have a saying, and I tell them all the time, I change the people or I change the people.
I love that. Change the people or I change
the people.
Okay.
And it's important, especially you have to run a police department like a business. Because it really is.
It is.
It is. There's so many aspects to the business that you need to have your finger on the pulse, whether it's hiring and who you're hiring and who's leading, you know, in training, having the right people who are training. You know, training is one thing, but do you have the right people training? You know, do you have the right people leading? Do you have the guy that's angry every day that's a leader? You know, especially in specialized kinds of environments.
Yes.
You know, and then that old thinking of the bronze, you know, we're the police, we're tough. And really most of the calls that we respond to on a day-to-day basis, even though we have our share of violence, a lot of them don't require physical interaction. It requires communication. That's it. Effective communication.
I've heard it described as a warrior mentality. It is that, and this is not a gotcha
21st century policing. 21st century policing is all about a guardian mentality and doing away with that warrior mentality. And if you
but does it still exist among those who are?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Because
within the training.
It does. Because some people associated the 21st century policing concepts with the Obama administration. And they never bought into it because they never bought into Obama. You know, if it came out of some other administration, we would have had more people buying into it, you know. But some people rejected it because of the source it came from. But it was put together by leaders throughout the industry and even leaders in the community of what contemporary and 21st century policing looked like. And it talked about training and wellness, procedural justice, you know, legitimacy in your work.
Yes.
You know, being legitimate, relationships.
I mean, I just was thinking about the fact that you're talking like, so how often when we're interacting with young people who are gotten who are in the justice system or the juvenile justice system, you know, they're there because of the worst day of their lives, right? Like, and so police officers deal with people in the worst moments and the worst days of their lives over and over and over again. I think it could be like just create a sense of despair about community if literally you have to go from every single, all you see are people at their very lowest, worst points. And then you got to go home and be like a father or a mother or a sister or a brother or, you know, and
very robotic life.
That's a very stressful thing. And I think those officers who do the sports programs and do get really engaged in their community or involved in their church life, that's got to be like one of the most important pieces for their wellness as a whole human, because how could you possibly
just run and handle crisis all day, every day? No human being can really do that and be able to, you know, function, you know, properly.
What your view of humanity might turn into if that's all you see.
If that's all you see.
Like what you think your community is, if that's all you see.
That's right.
And I'm going to tell you something, and you're so spot on. What happens is I've seen officers disassociate themselves from community. They don't consider themselves. I'm a police officer. I'm not community. Right. Like I have a close friend. He just became an officer. He's been in the office about 3 months. I'm so happy. Like, 'cause again, everybody know I don't trust officers, right? Like I've been under the scope, the scrutiny, right? And now I sit at the ad hoc committee for public safety in the city, right? Watch millions of dollars spent watching me to now, you know, because again, they see that I may have a way about doing things, but I love my community just as much as anybody else, right? And so when he got on the force. Yeah, man, I'm an officer, you know, he had been doing like police work for like 17 years for another entity, right? So his trainer ended up getting shot a couple months ago. The officer got shot in Whitehaven, and I could just feel his, and he's like, man, I wish I was there. And I'm like, whoa. You wish you was, yeah. And I'm like, bro, you must want to be shot too. What you mean you wish you was there, right? He like, no, I don't. And I'm like, I heard it. And so how do you feel? And he could not get into it. And this, I mean, I've been knowing since 97. I know his mama,
Just think, he wasn't on that scene. He wasn't a part of directly.
and vicariously, he still felt that.
So many of them felt
Yeah.
it. The amount of emotion and crying, and things like
the hurt,
that.
the sorrow, the
hurt.
sadness.
When you go to the hospital and you see all the officers, you know, first of all, taking a life is one that a lot of people think that officers, you know, come to work and they don't have an issue, you know, taking a life.
Right.
We have officers that take a life and never come back to policing. Because the level of guilt, even if their actions
Are justified.
But you have to be inhumane.
Keep replaying. I'm sure
Right.
they keep replaying.
Over and over again. Over and over again.
What could I
That's
I
right.
should have done this.
That's
I should
right.
have done that.
That's right. Second guessing themselves and thinking about the family, you know, and those types of things. But that trauma sometimes is packed up. And now we have I've got 3 psychologists that work for the police department now, because we just hired 2 more so that we could have debriefings and make sure that our officers get the kind of aftercare. So, and we make them stay home. You don't get to come back to work until we feel like you have gotten through whatever, you know, this crisis is.
And I say that because, so 2018, I sat down with the top brass and we asked for things like that, right? Because what we saw in the policy was officers would not get those services unless after there was a shooting, after there was, you know. And so because they see so much, right, that's piled on, and it's trauma. The way trauma works, right, it will show up. If I don't do something to get it out in a safe space,
That's right.
it's gonna show up.
It's gonna show up.
In our services, however,
right.
you know. And so I'm asking, since I know you have 3, what does it look like for people who have been seeing vicarious trauma or living through this vicarious trauma for years, right? To start going to see someone regularly versus only after an incident.
So we have what we call in-service training now. And so now our staff psychologists are part of that whole in-service training piece. And certain units have to go regularly.
Sweet.
Especially like someone who's working in crimes against children.
Most of that.
Domestic violence, you know, they see a lot. And they have their own kids. And sometimes, you know, it's just too much for them. So we make sure that they go on a regular basis too. But in our in-service training, you'll always have those folks that feel like they got it all. You know, I'm not affected. And those are the ones you got to be concerned about, because the bravado in the work sometimes causes that. We talked about it earlier, men being men. And even sometimes our ladies feel like, you know, I don't want anybody to think that I'm weak. Yeah. So some of it is sort of automatically baked in to our training.
You see how it's on both sides, right? It shows up different. The way trauma impacts the community, it's the same way it impacts the police department, right? What shows up is the power dynamic of police and community, right? I'm traumatized and I'm gonna show up. I might be scared, but to a police officer, I'm gonna show up angry. The police officer may be scared, but to the citizen, they're gonna show up angry.
Absolutely.
We just need to be an example of stripping away what society gave me, right? And the same as MPD. But again, I know that comes with doing your interpersonal work.
Yes.
It comes with being able to say, hey, you know what? Like I'm a bit fearful coming into this, right?
Right.
Let's get back to the real quickly. Let's get back to the kids for a minute. Because I'm seeing I keep hearing people say, well, you know, after every shooting, I really don't want us to become numb to it. Too late.
It's too late.
Too late.
Yeah.
And you know what that is? That's a protective device.
Risk management.
That's a safety thing that people have. And I know this from back in the old days, growing up through a thing called the Civil Rights Movement and Vietnam. Both, and they were related. As a kid, from the time I could read when I was 4. Time I was 4 years old, I knew the Jet magazine that had the photo of the week of who?
Martin Luther King.
Mm-mm.
Who?
No, 19, this was 1956.
I wasn't thought about
Oh, that was
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till
on the
in
cover.
the casket,
Yeah.
in the open casket, okay? I knew I could not, and I knew the magazine, the Jet, you know, you go to the barbershop, they got all the old Jets. And I knew the one that it was in, and every time I went to the barbershop, I could not help myself from looking at that. That was my little trauma in turn at 4.
Yeah.
But then growing up, you had, you know, Malcolm X getting killed. You had the 3 little girls in the Birmingham, or 4 little girls in Birmingham. You had Martin Luther King. You had Medgar Evers. It's
So many.
every other. And we, as kids, when you seeing all your leaders getting slain, you have to protect it. You can't care every time because it hurts too much. So you it's like a protective device.
Yeah.
Same thing happened to soldiers in Vietnam. We're boys and we're together today. Tomorrow he's in 3 pieces on the ground. And my response is ain't nothing.
And you have to
Like
keep,
I didn't care.
to keep moving.
So we
Yeah.
gotta pay particular attention to our children because the same thing is happening to them now.
Absolutely. So I know we probably could have continued talking, you know, all day about some of these issues, but I'm so glad that you all took time today to have a conversation, the beginning of some conversations. I would love to follow up with a tour and see your data. And you, Keedran, I'm going to get in touch with you. We're going to have to do some things together. I'm really interested to know about the program that you're working with young men, especially helping them to empower them. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Howard, again, thank you for taking time out of your business day. This has been a very robust conversation, authentic. And really,
The food was good too.
and the food was
Y'all
good.
fed us. Y'all fed us
I've
good.
got some to go, actually. And I really look forward to working with you as we all work towards a better Memphis. Really do.
Thank you.
Thank you.